Got Garrett Jess on today. He's a buddy of mine, transitioned kind of from the rodeo world into his family business, running the Ford dealerships in Washington. He's a great guy. He's a smart guy. He's a really smart guy. And it was fun for me to get to hear kind of how he's doing, what it was like before getting into where he is now and where he sees it going. So I think you'll enjoy listening. We are live. We're with Garrett Jess from Coulee City, Washington, the famous Jess family from Washington. Thanks.
Glad to be here.
Hey, okay, so I want to do this, if you can. Go back 10 years, because you're how old now?
29.
You are done rodeoing.
10 years ago or right now?
No, right now.
Okay.
Right now. You're done rodeoing. Despite my best efforts, you're working, you've got the family business, but let's go back 10 years. If you were to have a conversation right now with Garrett 10 years ago, what would you prepare? And here's why I ask. I know kind of the trajectory, like the changes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you and your friends. But how would you describe where you were 10 years ago to where you are right now?
Boy, 19, I thought I knew a lot. And I was just young, eager, ready to go conquer the world, and nothing was going to get in my way. And I guess I would tell myself to just enjoy the process a little bit more.
But specifically, you were pretty singular focused on just rodeoing at that point.
Yes, 100%.
That was it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of a lifelong thing.
Yeah, I mean, for as long as I can remember, all I wanted to do was make the NFR.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So at 19, you're rodeoing. When did you start going full time? Like, when did you go from kind of wanting to rope to doing that for a job?
I mean, probably into my later 20s. I mean, I rodeoed around here. Went to all. I was living with my mom and dad, till I was, in the summers till a couple years ago. But I would, my dad, if I ran out of money, my dad would give me a job or wash cars or whatever. So there for a while, I just would go to the rodeos around here, went to everything I could. And
who are you roping with then when you're mostly around here?
I roped with Bryce Palmer, Dakota Eldridge, and Clayton Hansen.
Didn't you and Dakota win both rounds and the average at the MPRE finals one year? Am I thinking right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then end up winning it for the year because of how much the finals paid?
Yes.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
That was 2012, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot about that until right
2010,
now.
2010, I think.
No, it wasn't. It was 12.
No, that was with Clayton.
You did it again?
Won the MPRA with Clayton, yeah.
Okay.
Not both rounds in the average, though.
So here's what's so interesting to me, because like in a rodeo perspective, one of the things I was always afraid of, and one of the things I would want to, like, if I could talk to a young person, is know what the exit looks like. Because you see people, we've talked about this in the rodeo world, that was their goal. And until they accomplish everything that they wanted to accomplish, they are not going to look up. They are not going to quit. And this isn't just rodeo, and this is any pursuit. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes in my life, I feel loyalty to a goal that I set when I was young due to a lack of information, but based strictly on loyalty to the fact that it's something I used to want. I still feel responsible to try to accomplish that for, like, my former self, if that makes sense.
Like, you're not done until you accomplish it.
But it almost is a feeling of being a failure, even if that original goal was set by a young, inexperienced person who didn't see the world accurately. So you're now 29 years old. Mm-hmm. You're married. That's how we know each other, is through Valerie, who I knew as a child because I'm really old. You're done. Like you're still roping, like we're roping right this weekend. But as far as like doing it for a passion, something you're pursuing, how did that take place? What did the shift?
So throughout, I grew up, my dad had a dealership, and, I grew up around rodeoing and the dealership and all of that. And having the family I did, I always knew that I wanted to have a family and come back and work for the business. And
that wasn't something that you were afraid of, like as a kid. That wasn't like, I'll never do this. I say that because the typical teenage kid is like, I'm not going to do that.
No, I always knew I wanted to do that.
You did.
Well, I always knew it was the only thing, not the only thing, but it was my best
It was
opportunity.
the obvious thing that was.
Yeah, the obvious best opportunity in front of me that I could take to provide for my future family and give them the opportunity that I knew rodeo couldn't give my family the opportunity that the business could.
Right.
So I always knew that I was going to come back and be a part of the business.
Yeah.
So at the time when I quit rodeoing was a combination of changes in the dealership. We're expanding, and I wasn't a part of that because I was rodeoing, and it was like, golly, all this cool stuff's going on. I want to be a part of that. I was dating my wife, Valerie, and, wanting to be with her more. And my life was just changing, and I was growing up, kind of being more mature, I guess. And on top of, I guess, emotional hardship through rodeoing, and just like kept trying and just felt like it wasn't going my way, and just finally like all this came together on, well, I guess it just my perception and the way I looked at it just changed to where if I am going to go back and be a part of the business, it needs to be now while my family needs me more than ever as we're expanding.
So if I'm listening to this, it would be easy for someone to say, well, yeah, must be nice. If you're Garrett, Jess, and you've got that to go back to, I would have quit rodeoing, but I don't have what you have. What would you say to somebody? Because in my opinion, rodeoing is a funny thing. Like, it's awesome. I still love it. I still have this weird thing with it that doesn't even make sense because it is so not my life anymore. But what do you say to somebody who is like getting to that place where their ability is starting to kind of crescendo a little bit, and they can kind of like the whole world sees it, even if they're not acknowledging it, like the whole world sees that, like, hey, might be time to move on, but they don't have that opportunity. Would you say that even though you had what looks like an advantage, what was an advantage? I think you'd even say that. Isn't it still worth looking at a plan of how to get out of it at some point rather than trying to stay? Because what I've noticed is if somebody doesn't address the difficulty of like, this season is over, time to go to the next season, anything that life gave them, that life takes back if they stay too long.
Well, I don't know if I would look at it as knowing when to get out as much as having something else to do. You know what I mean? Because rodeo doesn't have a pension plan. Rodeo doesn't have a 401k. Rodeo doesn't have
money.
Yeah. I mean, there's becoming more money, but let's just say right now you rodeo for a living and there's no rodeos to go to. What are you going to do? So it's always good to have an idea of something else that you can do. But I also know that in order to accomplish at that level, I mean, we talked about this yesterday, in my opinion, I mean, it has to be 100% devotion to that goal.
Right.
So it's almost like at a conflict of, that eventually you need to have something else to do to provide, but I'll worry about that then. But that is when it can be hard.
So if there's the purist that all they've ever wanted to do is, race cars, race dirt bikes, play soccer, play baseball, play basketball. I mean, every athletic endeavor eventually will go through something like this. But the purist would say, is there the possibility that by having something to leave to go to, that you left a little on the table that could have still been accomplished?
I feel that way. I mean, I'm driving down the road, going to the rodeos, spending my time thinking about roping, but also thinking about the business and what I'll do with the business. And, you can argue whether that gets in the way or not, but I can just tell you what happened.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I know other people that they live and breathe it, and that's all that they do. And, like I said, I was driving to the rodeos, spending my time going back between the two.
So that's one of the things that frustrates me about you is when you do talk about rodeoing, I would have expected there to be more, not that it's 100% gone, but by and large, like when I ask you stuff about what you used to do, there's kind of just a general disinterest. Now you're talking about the business and expansion. And like last night we went to a guy's house for dinner and you're talking about like real estate investments and like you have transitioned completely, like fully. And I'm like, Dude, no, you can't. You're 29. In your mind, are you finding the same kind of competitive itch now in a different platform moving into the next season?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm competitive by nature, so, but it's other interests. It's, whether it be business modeling or whether it be, finding different types of investments or researching. I really enjoy learning, so I like learning about these different things that maybe I want to invest in, or maybe that I want to tweak on my business model a little bit, and then seeing that play out.
Getting to see if what you thought was going to works
Yeah.
when it's applied.
Yeah, and that to me is, I guess, to compare the competitiveness. When you see something and you enact a change that you think will work and it does, it's kind of like roping 2 feet at a rodeo.
That's probably true. I mean, I think that kind of goes to, and tell me what you think, but that's part of what it means to be a provider in a sense. It's not, I mean, 1,000 years ago, maybe it was who was the best hunter. But in hunting, what's crazy about hunting is the same concept as you go out with a plan, you execute the plan, and everybody benefits from it. Well, now, like being the pastor of a church, as weird as that sounds, because like we've talked about, like the church model that we have here is so different. You running a dealership and having to decide, like, am I going to do it the way that my dad or my grandpa did it? Is there innovation to be had, or is the wheel already developed? I think that's part of what challenges men in general. And I think that's the thing people miss about a competitive endeavor. I think, honestly, that's what's so hard for people to walk away from is I would imagine it would be hard for someone 40 years old that's done something their whole life and all the experience and all the knowledge and everything that they've learned to set that down and go start at the bottom somewhere else. I mean, in fairness to people, I don't know how people would do that if they didn't have an inroad. Because like I said, you're an interesting story because like when you do go to the rodeos, everybody's like, welcome back. Like there's this hope that someday Garrett's going to like resurface and he's going to be back. And I think in your mind, you kind of are setting a little bit of a pattern for people that are watching. What would that be like? What would that be like if I wasn't doing this anymore? Could I transition in life? How much of your faith or your family or Valerie, what's the combination of that in the transition? Because like I said, at 29, you're kind of at the peak, and you're ahead. It's almost like it feels like maybe you left early, but that means that you're early in the next season. Like you're there, you've got a little bit of a transition period to get started, so that by the time you are, 35, which is only 6 years away, you're already up and rolling again.
God, that's old, isn't it?
It happens fast, man. I'm telling you. I swear, you wake up one day and you're like, what? But it's gonna happen. So you got a head start. So what role is like in your walk with God? Say, what role? How does that play into the next season of going in and starting something different after not necessarily accomplishing what you set out to do in the first one?
Boy, I don't know. I feel like I've always been a guy that has tried to plan ahead and try to think ahead. Maybe almost too much a little bit to where I'm not focused on the now and sometimes, or in some areas, or at sometimes.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. I feel like maybe in my relationship with God that maybe he's kind of changing that a little bit to enjoy now and today and the people you are with today. And, it's good to have a plan and idea, but don't focus on that so much that you miss today.
How do you do that? Because I suck at that. I can tell you right now, I'm
Me
terrible
too.
at like today always suffers because tomorrow has like my thoughts. I'm always thinking about tomorrow, and almost like you said, you start something and you're working on it and it works. And I'm like, okay, great. But that almost feels like yesterday. Once it starts to work, I'm over it. I want to see what the next opportunity, like what's the next season. How do you do that? How do you get to a place where today doesn't suffer?
Well, I feel like God is just like almost trying to reveal that to me and like kind of lead me down this path of how to enjoy that, how to see that, and why it's important. And we've talked a lot over the last 6 months and stuff, but it's almost like I got to this point in my relationship with God where it's like, I just, I know in the Bible it talks about I've come to give you life and life to the fullest, or life more abundantly, but I don't really know what that means. Okay. And trying to figure out what that means, and then getting to know you and talk to you and kind of maybe it's almost like, well, maybe that's it, or maybe this is it. And I try to convince myself of what life more abundantly is, but it's more of just God's kind of just been revealing these truths along the way. And part of that revelation in my life is just enjoying the people today, enjoying the relationships today, instead of so much focus on the future and where I want to be. Just, getting to know people and who they are and just enjoying now.
I think that's what I was poking around at. It probably took us 10 minutes to get to that point right there, is that what I see is that you're learning to be fulfilled regardless of circumstance. And I think that's the thing that keeps people in seasons, whatever those seasons are, for too long, is they don't know, apart from circumstances, who they are. Like there's an identity piece that's missing, because so much of their identity is based on what they've done or things that they do rather than who they are. And what you're saying in that is, that, if I'm understanding you right, is that God's teaching you how to be. So no matter where you go, whether it's this season, transition into the next season, whether you're at the top over here, going to the bottom over here, or vice versa, whether you're at the bottom over here and you get to take a step, if you can understand an identity piece, then you're not always networking. And what I mean by that is you're not always looking to better your own position in life. Have you ever talked to somebody like that? Like you feel like every conversation you have, they're like, yeah. Anyway, so and it's like there's an agenda. That's something I never get from you. I never talk to you ever where it feels like there's an agenda or an end in mind. It's just funny to hear you say that you're working on getting better at it, because I think it's something you're so good at. Like you're so good at like having the conversation today. You're talking about the business. Sure, you want the business to do well. You want your family to do well, but like you are good at doing life today in whoever you're in contact with. So if somebody were to say, okay, how do you get that? What's the answer? Because I get what you're saying. Like you're going into that season where God sort of put the ball on the tee, so to speak, right? And so then you start understanding this concept of grace and mercy and relationship. And like in your mind, it comes clear. How does the ball get set on the tee for the next guy?
Boy, I mean, I don't know if you can put the ball on the tee for anybody. I think it's all their own way of getting there or whatever. I just tell you, for me in my life, it was like, as much as I tried to be a good Christian and tried to do all the good things, it's like I knew that Jesus was about grace and mercy, but I didn't experience the grace and mercy, until, just a few years ago or whatever. And so you get to this point where like, well, if it's not about what I do, then what do I do?
Right.
Okay. And so then it's like, well, that's kind of sucks, because now it's like, I don't know what to do.
Right.
And so then you get to this point of like, well, if I don't know what to do, what do I do? And that's almost like, that's the point.
You just go back to doing, generally what people do is they go back to what they've always done before.
Yeah.
They say like with a calf, if a calf ever gets separated from the herd when you're gathering, that calf will run back to wherever the last place it got fed. And it'll wait because it knows its mom will come back to it. And I think people are that same way in moments of like transition where they're not sure. They're not sure what the next season of life looks like. They see life changing. They have a tendency to go back to the last place they were comfortable. But so many times that place doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
You can't go back to your youth. I mean, it's like the guy that's 25 that's still going to the high school parties. Like, no, that life doesn't exist anymore. You can't go back to that life. And it is hard to go, then what do I do? Instead of who? What instead of who?
Yeah. And I mean, in that of just, finally getting to the point that I am a sinner and I'm not good enough and there's nothing I can do, and almost put kind of like, it was almost like a hole, like all I've been doing my whole life is trying. Right. And now I'm not, now I've got to the point where
the striving was part of the program.
Yeah. Like all I know how to do is try. Now that it's not about trying, now what? And now it's kind of, there's gotta be more, there's gotta be something more. What, God, just show me what this life more abundantly means. And that's kind of the journey it's led me down. It's just enjoying the people in front of you today. And kind of like your sermon talked about of, just be the bush and let the fire take care of the rest almost.
Yeah. So where do you see that going? I mean, because you are a goal person, you are a try kind of a person. Mm-hmm. Where do you apply that energy? Because trying, one of the things I've noticed is that there's an energy associated with trying. And we like to think that it's spiritual energy. Don't worry, God, I'm going to try to really be a good Christian. God's like, that's not what I asked. And you're like, okay. So then there's a piece. That's what gets me is when people are like, oh, here's the rules and you got to do this, you got to do that. If you ever ask them like, well, what about joy? That's the one thing that's always missing in the pursuit of the rules, joy. I mean, how many times in September 1st, do you see somebody who's rodeoing for a living? You're like, hey, how's it going? And they're like, it's just not, there's no joy.
You know what's funny is when I quit rodeoing and I'd see my old buddies and I'd be like, hey man, how's it going? Oh, not very good. Just, roped a leg here, broke the barrier here. And it was like, no, I'm not talking about rodeo. I'm talking about you. How are you doing?
Right.
But I remember when me rodeoing, it just was all about
right.
my identity or my joy was wrapped up in how I did at the rodeo, and that was it.
Well, the same thing would be true about the dealership. If you hadn't learned it, you would have taken that flawed concept into any season. Yeah. It had to be a you thing that got fixed.
Hey, Garrett, how you doing? Oh, man, car sales are down,
So tell me about that, and that's interesting because you are in a season right now that's been difficult. You're coming out of the worst 8 weeks in the history of Jess Auto. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't very pretty. I mean, we pretty much were handcuffed on selling cars. I mean, it didn't turn out as bad as we thought, but it didn't feel good.
Yeah. So what do you, as a leader, because now you're in a position of leadership. I mean, you got a lot of people that are looking to you that there's the obvious transition coming from Wade coming to Garrett, and people are kind of looking to you at this point because, I mean, it's a storm. I mean, things are shut down. What's the messaging? I mean, what are you telling people about where you're at, where you're going?
So right now we're trying to almost just get back to the basics, establish a sustainable structure that is healthy for everybody. One thing I've learned through all this is that for a community, a healthy business is important for not only community, but members of the community because it provides jobs, gives them a way to support their families or whatever. And if you take that away, now you have less going on around the community, less people dealing with each other, interacting with each other, and, just less opportunity, I guess.
Have you ever felt and I'm not saying name names, obviously, but have you, in the back of your mind, and maybe it's imagined, let's just say that, maybe it's possible it's imagined, but in the back of your mind, have you ever felt like that because you guys do well, that there's been resentment before all this happened, that there's a resentment associated with that? And now what you're seeing is like, okay, I get that, but without, like you said, without a successful business, literally everyone around it.
So yes, there was let's just say a Facebook post one time. And
when you say, let's just say, usually it's going to be code. You go, let's just say a Facebook, you literally just said exactly what it was. It was literally a Facebook post.
This is what it was. It was a Facebook post. Okay. A family member put a political Facebook post on Facebook. Okay. So one of their Facebook friends commented on the Facebook post.
Yeah.
And obviously on the other side of the aisle for politics. And then put their own post, not on the post, put their own post about, one of the richest family up on Snob Hill, this, and it was like, that was the first time it was like, I mean, I'm sorry, we've had a good business.
Right. Well, and I think what the enemy wants to do to us individually is always bring shame. Because shame is the fight or flight. Shame is panic decisions. Shame is decisions not based on fact, based on feelings, right? Anything he can do to bring shame to literally anyone, that's what he's going to do. He'll shame poor people for their poverty. He'll shame successful people for their wealth and everything in between. It doesn't matter what people are doing. The enemy is always looking for an opportunity to create shame because shame is self-focus. You look at yourself, you see why you're not as good as you'd like to be. And the thing about shame that's so frustrating is it's always based on truth. Like the enemy's not going to come in and accuse you of something that's wrong. He's going to come in and accuse you of something that's accurate, but he'll just paint the picture around it to be worse, right? So would you say that by going through the difficulty that you've gone through the last 8 weeks, that it's helped you as far as being armed, so to say, of like, no, I don't have to accept the shame for doing well as long as I'm using what we're doing to start.
Well, yeah, it's provided more clarity it's provided more clarity in that how important it is to have a successful business in the community, not just not for your own personal gain, but for the community. I mean, you're providing a service for the community, providing jobs for the community. And, you know, if you take that away, you can't tell me that's better for the community than if a successful business providing jobs is for the community.
Definitely.
I mean,
well, and hopefully the thought, if it does what it could do, is that it re-clarifies for you guys of why you give into the community. Instead of just doing it because it's the rules or what you're supposed to do, there's a genuine heartfelt connection to like, no, we matter to this community. We make a point to try to make the world better around us, which is a godly concept. That's a biblical concept, even applied to a dealership. But without it, like you said, what it also does is people go, oh, wait a minute. We really don't want them to disappear. We don't want them to do bad, because by them doing bad, we do bad, which is kind of how the economy works. That's an economy. What you're describing is how an economy works. Don't try to penalize the biggest contributors. You know, look at the biggest contribution and try to pour into that, because when there's a source of contribution, everybody around that wins. But that's a biblical concept, is that, yeah, I could go down that road. Anyway, so what's the season looking like now? You guys are back open?
yeah, we're back open with proper
Social
distancing and safety precautions on how to sell a car, service a car in a safe manner.
How do you sell a car in a safe manner?
So,
No. Let me ask that again. How could you sell a car in an unsafe manner so as to know how to avoid that? What would an unsafe selling strategy be?
Apparently,
Hugging,
yeah. So
getting so excited that they buy a car.
Honestly, if you go to our website, our slogan is "Where
Nope.
a handshake still means something." So
So that's out.
we got to redefine everything
no,
we
a
stand
handshake
for.
means something. Means disease.
Yeah,
That's what it means. That's what it means.
Yeah, we went from I like the people that give handshakes to no, we're not buying there. They give handshakes.
Yeah. Woof. A handshake means something, but according to the CDC. So a safe car sales practices 6 feet.
Yeah. So actually,
What happens if what happens if a customer comes in and is not abiding? They're going to buy a car. You know they're going to buy a car, but they're not operating in the social distancing. Garrett, what do you do? Verbal warning? Do you have a ruler?
no, I'm not the enforcer. I am the facilitator of a safe environment. Okay. So here, Jordan.
Who's the enforcer? How would you enforce that?
I guess the government. I don't know.
Yeah, no, good point. They need to be ready if somebody wants to come in and unsafely buy a car.
So we have to have a log of who all comes in. We have to have.
You actually do?
Yeah.
Okay, because that's contact tracing, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But yeah, we have gloves. We have sanitizer.
Do you know what would save you guys some headaches? I'm just giving you some advice. I think this is great advice. That, hey, the government is making us run your credit before we let you in the store. And then you can kind of get an idea of like who's there to kick tires and who's there to actually buy a car. You could just get that out of the way right up front. That would just cut down a lot of nonsense, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to give you that idea for free.
Appreciate it.
So obviously you can tell my feelings on all this, but within reason, social distancing, trying to meet the standards, but being able to safely ease back into.
Yeah. And in a way, it's kind of like your church. In a way, it's pushed us to be better at things we needed to be better at anyways, right? So using our technology, videos, being better at online presence and stuff like that. So
Don't you think that's kind of where everything's going anyway?
Yeah.
I mean, don't you feel like that from a dealership standpoint, in my mind, because you guys, what's your delivery range? How far will you guys drive to deliver a vehicle?
So what I can tell you is we've sold vehicles in the last 6 months to California, Wisconsin. We had a guy put a deposit down from Ohio, but everything shut down. He couldn't come. So, yeah.
So he lost his deposit.
Well, no, I mean, it's still on deposit. And he's like, hey, I still want the truck, but when I can.
So if that's the case, then online's huge. I mean, that's huge because you're branding a dealership that maybe people wouldn't see in person, but you still got range that you could sell all over.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, exactly like the church, how could we have gotten there? Like we see what we need to be doing, but with the church running every single week and all the stuff that goes on, like there would have been no time to sort of shut down, reshuffle, reestablish, and move that direction.
Yeah.
So in a sense, in the long run, it's going to be an advantage. You feel that way, or you feel like you're just
Yeah, I mean, it's speeding up the process of where it's headed, and if you use that time wisely, it can allow you to stay with it instead of try to catch up with it.
Yeah. So your dad has been in this. He's been doing this for how long?
91.
So this is brand new for him, because I think it's for you. You've been doing this for what, 3 or 4 years, like this, right? Mm-hmm. So to have to change your methods right now isn't huge because you've only been at it for a little while. But your dad since 91, I mean, we're talking like monumental shifts. I'm thinking like my dad pastoring, like if the difficulty of going online. I mean, philosophically, it's a different philosophy altogether.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's been all the change at once, though. I mean, we've gradually been changing as it goes on. And
does he like that, Wade? Does he like kind of the new direction of things, or is he slow to?
No, he embraces I mean, it is what it is, right? It's sink or swim. So if you're denying it, you're just.
Is he pretty results based, like whatever's getting the results, or does he enjoy the process of kind of keeping up on stuff?
He enjoys the process. Yeah. I mean, it's all about staying ahead of it. It's that competitiveness, right? Kind of seeing and analyzing where things are going and where they're at, and trying to, be ahead of it, or at least with it.
Yeah, yeah. So, will there have been more changes in the dealership industry, standard industry-wide, in the last 10 years or in the next 10 years?
Next 10 years.
That's where the changes are going to happen.
Yeah.
What are the obvious ones? What are the obvious changes in your model?
Okay, so, in the last couple of years, there's been extreme changes. So Washington State, you can't fully buy a car online, right? So you need, Washington legislation says you need wet signatures, actual ink on forms, on a certain amount of forms. Okay, so like a title app or an odometer, or maybe even a law contract.
Okay.
Some of the banks only require wet signatures. The banks are actually adapting quicker than the state. I actually talked to the state association for dealers here a couple weeks ago, and was like, when can we sell a car? What about selling a car online? I mean, what about this? Because
right. You'd think that'd be the safest way. I mean, if you're trying to create social distancing, for their own standard, you'd think that'd be the best option.
Well, legislation doesn't allow for it. So,
but that's what I'm saying. Like, if they're going to put the legislation that says you cannot sell a car, shouldn't they also follow that with?
So the state
let's get political, Garrett.
The state association is for the dealers, right? So they represent the dealers. They're not the state.
I see.
So the state has
that's the
legislation, right? State association recommends things for legislation,
I see.
right? So I talked to the state association about when can we buy a car online. It's on the ballot. It'll be voted on next session. All right, when's next session? January.
Oh, great.
Yeah, perfect.
But if they did that, if you were able to start selling cars online, then at that point you need to start leaning heavily into online sales, right? Because there's no geographical restrictions at that point.
Yeah, and I mean, right now it can already happen. It's just kind of new. The process needs to be, I guess, tweaked on, and maybe it's just our store. We need to have a definitive process for how that can happen. Because as soon as that legislation change, boom. And in some states, you can already do it.
Right.
So,
yeah, I'd be interested because that gives you so much more freedom too. I mean, you're a young guy getting ready to start a family. I mean, the freedom to be able to be a little more mobile based on online rather than stuck to a specific building. I mean, how far in the future is that for you to conceivably be more mobile? Let me ask you this. Like if you go to see Valerie's family in Texas, your ability to continue working while you're on that trip. That's what I'm saying. Not like that you're going to just go move to Alaska.
So what I would say is there's a lot of everything's internet based now as far as the stuff you're using. So that is being more and more capable as technology comes out. We use Microsoft a lot, and that's kind of just open doors for us on being able to do our job from wherever, as long as you have internet.
And that would give me stress to think that I couldn't do my job while I was gone, because it would feel like everything's suffering. But if there's a way to update it where you could stay sort of in contact, to me, that's where I'd want to go.
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice to be able to, you know, me and my wife, let's go here for however long and be able to still work in that
So
environment.
what keeps somebody from buying? Like, it seems like in some dealerships the prices are different, like that it's cheaper because of delivery or whatever. What allows you guys to stay competitive in Washington as opposed to like a dealership in Idaho or a dealership in Alabama? How do you create a margin in that?
Well, on the used inventory, it's, you know, you try to make the best buys you can, and your margin is kind of made on the buy, not really the sell, but a combination of both. Hold firm, create value.
Yeah.
You know,
Is that what your family does well, is the buying and selling part? Would you say that's the strength of Jess Auto right now?
I would say that historically speaking, we've been really good at buying. I mean, my dad is, he'll look for hours and hours and hours for the perfect car at the perfect price. And I mean, he's dialed in when it comes to buying inventory.
Done it long enough, he knows where to look and what he's found when he finds it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what about, okay, so let's say Ford F-350, King Ranch, Dually, brand new, every button you can get. What variation in price is based on geography? Is that truck going to cost the same pretty much no matter where you buy it?
In the U.S., yes, pretty much.
So in that regard, what gives you a leg up? I mean, why online? What would cause somebody to buy something from you, versus somewhere else? Where do you feel like you can create the greatest margin for the customer?
So it's interesting because Ford is in the model of kind of tweaking on their model a little bit and almost buying a vehicle through their website, and then that lead goes to surrounding dealers, and the customer can pick. So if that's the case, price will almost become less irrelevant, and the process or the experience will be more relevant.
Gotcha. So the personal touch part of it, where a handshake matters, that kind of stuff actually does start to factor in.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be more about branding yourself and why to buy here for other reasons other than price on the new side.
Well, and that to me, like, I love the mom and pop concept, but a lot of times mom and pop can't get the prices that like a big corporation could, which is why the big corporations usually in the long run play out to be the better deal. But what you're saying is you guys can remain high in customer service, high in the human interaction, and still be competitive pricing because Ford is doing a lot of the price setting. Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, so all us dealers buy the inventory at the same price. And then there obviously is MSRP. So Ford has a suggested retail price, and then we pick what price we sell it for. But
so when somebody comes in and they're like, because I do this all the time, every time I've bought a truck, I'm like, what is the bottom? I'm just kind of playing with numbers that are already preset. There's not a lot of wiggle room, really.
So we've tried to be pretty market priced up front, because with the way online is right now, everybody looks for vehicles online, finds the one they like at the price they like, and then reaches out to the dealer, right? So before you had to actually go to the dealership to see the inventory. Now you can see all the inventory from your home, wherever. Right. If I get an inquiry on the vehicle, I already know that they've accepted the price is pretty close because they're inquiring on it. Yeah. Otherwise, they wouldn't have inquired.
Is this what you're going to do for the rest of your life?
Probably. I mean,
if I were to say this is what you're going to be doing for the rest of your life, what would your reaction be? You're good with that? You're happy with it? You're nervous about it?
Yeah, no, I'm pretty good with it. Yeah, I enjoy what I do. I mean, I really do.
How many rodeo friends do you think that you will hire over the next 5 years? Specifically 2020, where there are no rodeo. Have you had anybody call yet?
No.
Oh, do you think that'd be hard? Would that be hard to call? Like, hey,
let me put this in perspective. Garrett, listen, I don't have any rodeos. I need a job, and I'm gonna move to Grand Coulee. I haven't got many of those phone calls.
Fair enough. Well, hey, Appreciate it. Thanks for jumping on. It was awesome.
Yeah, had a blast. Thanks.